Today's story is about Johu, whose soul is transferred to a different world. He now lives in a world where most people possess magical powers known as Beyonders. To become a Beyonder, you must drink a magic potion, and after this, 22 pathways open up for the Beyonder. The Beyonder must navigate one of these pathways. Each pathway contains a unique magical power. Once inside the pathway, the Beyonder encounters 9 sequences. After completing each sequence, they are granted a magical power. The lower their sequence number, the greater their magical power. This means that as a Beyonder progresses from sequence 9 to sequence 1, their power will gradually increase. The story begins, and we see Johu, whose soul is transferred to a different world. We see his soul enter the body of a man named Klin. Here, Johu notices a hole in his head, but the hole gradually fills. He sees a diary and a gun in front of him. Seeing this, he realizes that the man in whose body he has entered has lost his life, had attempted to kill him. And at this point, we see 2 more dead bodies. Their names are Welch and Naya. Both of them had killed themselves, and it's here that we learn that these 2 used to be classmates of the client. The next day, we see Joe learn some things about the client, Klein's parents are dead, Klein lives with his sister, and they're currently living in Tingen City, and Klein has just completed his graduation. Additionally, Johu finds a diary belonging to a client. Inside, the client wrote that Wells visited him on the 29th. It also mentions that Wells possesses an old book, and the author of the book belongs to the Antigonus family. At the end of the diary, it says, "Everyone will be killed, including me." Joe is at a loss as to why the client would have written this. Just then, his client's sister arrives. After seeing this, Joe hides the bloodstains and the gun. We learn that the client's sister's name is Melissa. Joe begins to wonder how he came to be in this world. Then Joe remembers that he bought a book containing a ritual and that it may have been the reason he came to this world. Melissa then explains, "Today I'm going to cook your favorite meal because you've been working so hard to get a job." After saying this, Melissa leaves for school, and here we see Joe thinking, "I should perform that ritual again, maybe I'll get back to my world." But Joe also begins to think that when the client committed suicide, his sister must have heard the gunshot. But why didn't his sister react? After thinking so much, he goes to the market to buy bread, because bread is needed for the ritual Johu is about to perform. And then Klein goes to buy bread for himself. While he's bringing the bread, he sees some people playing cards on the road. We then learn that this card game was originally started 100 years ago by a king named Roselle, who introduced the people here to steam engines and tarot reading. So after learning all this, the client believes that Roselle, like him, must have come from the future. But then we see a clown appear before Clint and tell him, "Please come to my circus. Come." But then the client notices that someone is following him, and he immediately hides inside a tent. The man following the client is named Jenkins. He was about to follow the client into the tent, but then he sees a policeman there, so he moves away. We see that inside the tent where the client is, there's a woman sitting, essentially a tarot card reader, one who predicts the future by looking at the cards. The client thinks, "This kind of thing happens in my world too." Then the woman says, "You're my first client, so I'll tell you your future for free." Klein sits down. Klein explains, "I want to see my past, present, and future." Then she draws 3 cards in front of Lady Klein, places them on the table, and says, "These 3 are your past, present, and future. Now tell me what you want to see." Klein then tells her, "First, I want to see my present." Then the girl turns a card face up, which is facing up. Above it is written, "The Flower," which represents a new beginning. But then a girl comes and declares that she is a real tarot card reader. This means that the girl who was predicting Clint's future here turned out to be a fake. So Clint leaves. Once home, we see Clint take 4 loaves of bread and wrap a piece of paper around them. After placing the 4 loaves at the 4 corners, he begins to perform his ritual. Initially, it seems that the ritual has no effect on the client, but then we see that suddenly something begins to happen to the client, and he is transported to a new world where there is only smoke all around him. But in this world, this smoke is called the Gray Fog. There are 2 stars in front of Clint, one red, one blue. Clint touches both stars, causing them to explode, and then we see a girl named Orderly standing in front of her mirror, and then we see a boy named Elger sitting on the edge of the sea. And here, both of them are drawn into this gray world against their will, and after arriving here, they both have to go to a client's office. A huge shadow appears. The only difference is that the 3 of them can't see each other's faces clearly. Klein is wondering if he's called these 2 here. But then the Orderly asks, Are you the master of this place, this sacred place? Hearing this, Klein wonders, if this place is so sacred, where is its temple? And then, after so much thought, a temple-like structure appears. Klein understands that he can control this place, so Klein brings a large table and a large chair for himself, creating a throne for himself. Then Alger begins to ask, why have you called us here and who are you? Klein begins to wonder, what should I tell them about my name? Then Klein reveals, my name is the Fool, and it's the same name the client saw on her tarot card. The orderly then asks the Fool, why have you called us here? If you don't have any work, can we go home? Klein then explains, I'll send you home if you want. But the girl here she was very excited after seeing this new world, so she asked the client, how can we become a Beyonder? But Klein can't answer this question because the client doesn't know anything about Beyonders. So Klein tells her that the person sitting in front of her will answer this question. Then Alger tells her that she definitely belongs to the Land Kingdom. So if she wants to become a Beyonder, she must join one of the churches. But becoming a Beyonder isn't that easy. Although many people have become Beyonders, they constantly fight dark magic after becoming one. Then the orderly asks if there's any other way to become a Beyonder besides the church. Alger tells her that to do so, she must join a royal family. But the orderly asks again, is there any other way? So here Alger explains that there's another way, and on this one, you'll need to drink a magic potion. And here, Alger explains, I have 2 portions of sequence 9. One is called the Sailor, and the other is called the Spectator. And after drinking these portions, you can become a Beyonder. Here, Klein listens to them both talk. He understands that these two are definitely talking about a supernatural power, and he also understands that the sequence must be the level of that power. The client is also thinking that perhaps the one who brought him into this world is a birder. This is why he suddenly came into this world and is constantly learning things about it. Then the orderly explains that she has struck a deal with this man. He will give her a magic potion, and in return, I will give him some items. I would like you to hold such meetings regularly. Alger also explains, Mr. Fool, your power is much greater than both of us. Therefore, I would like for us both to conduct such small meetings. You won't have to come here again and again. Alger thinks that by attending such meetings regularly, he can sell his items and get some good stuff in return. Here, the client understands that he needs to attend such meetings regularly to learn more about this world and ultimately to return to his own world. Then Audrey suggests that we should also adopt code names, meaning we are in this world. We won't use our real names. So we see that here, Orderly changes his name to Justice. And here, Olger changes his name to the Hanged Man. But then we see a man come and knock on Klein's door. Klein tells them both, I'm ending this meeting here. After saying this, he sends them to their respective locations. Then as Klein returns to his room, he sees the police arrive at the gate. So he immediately hides his book, which is covered in blood, and also hides his gun. Now we see that the policeman's name is Leonard, and another partner of his named Dan Smith also arrives. They both come to meet the client to ask him what happened to his friends. And here, Leonard finds the client's diary. He immediately asks him, what did you write on the last page of the diary? Everyone will die. And what does that mean? Now, after hearing this, the client is at a loss for what to tell them. So he begins to explain, I have lost my memory, so I don't remember anything that happened last night. In fact, I even tried to kill myself, but I don't know how I survived. You can see the gun I kept in the dustbin. Then Dunn says, okay, no problem. We'll take you to a psychic who will restore your memories. Hearing this, the client becomes even more frightened, fearing that if this happens, that the psychic manipulates his mind, they will discover that he is not from this world. Then the two of them are taking the client with them, but then we see a boy stealing bread and running away. They both notice the boy, and Klein takes advantage of the opportunity to escape. While running, Klein enters an alley. He sees someone throw water on him, but the water stays in the air. He also sees that all the objects around him are also floating in the air. And after seeing the ring, the client realizes that this is the work of a birder. He then rushes into a horse cart and asks the driver to take him to the sea. Now we see that, after a while, when Klein looks out the window to see that no one is following him, he tells the driver to stop the car. But the driver doesn't do so and continues driving away. But then the client realizes that his driver is none other than Dunn, who is taking him to Wells' house. But then Klein suddenly opens his eyes and finds himself back home. It seems to Klein that everything that has happened to him since morning was probably a dream. But then Dunn arrives at his door, and Dunn explains that he is a birder and his power increases at night. Klein is wondering what this means for us, but then we see that as soon as the client comes out, someone suddenly comes from behind and grabs him. This girl, who is also a Beyonder, starts looking inside the client's memories. Here we see that Klein was able to see his real parents inside the memories, but the girl is unable to do so because we see that the client's parents were covered in a fog. Then later the girl asks the client where the Antigonus family book is, but Klein says he doesn't know anything about it. Then the girl asks, "Can you at least tell me what happened that night at Welch and Naya's house?" Klein replies, "I don't know anything about what happened to them." Then the girl asks, "What were you doing when your friends died?" Klein then pulls a gun into Klein's hand. He then turns it on himself. Klein then tries to explain that he also tried to commit suicide that night. Seeing this, the girl realizes Klein is telling the truth. She then tells Dunn that the client shot himself that night. "I also tried to look into his memories," she says, "but I found nothing there either." Then Dunn tells him, "Look, the Antigonus family book has been stolen. This means your life is in danger, so do one thing, join us, and then you can become a brother." Then we see Klein go to a pub the next day. It's basically a pub. He thinks that if he joins Nighthawk's team, he might learn a lot about the place. Furthermore, if he joins their team, he'll be safe. Then we see the client enter the pub. Upon arrival, he meets a man named Wright and tells him that Dunn Smith gave him the address. Then we see the man take the client into an elevator. After descending the elevator, the client meets the front desk clerk. She takes him to Dunn Smith's room, where the clerk tells him that this is their office. This is Nighthawk's office, which they've set up downstairs. Upstairs, we see the client meet several other buyers along the way. Then we see the client arrive at Dunn Smith's room. Dunn hands him a paper and tells him to sign it. "This will be your contract." After seeing it, Klein asks if I'm going to join the police force, but Dunn explains that it's nothing like that. "We're just doing it to show the world. They work for the police, but the truth is, we work for the Church of the Evernight Goddess. And if there's a murder involving supernatural or magical powers, only then do we investigate it. Otherwise, we don't take on normal cases." And now, Klein also becomes a member, meaning he's also a member of the Nighthawks. Klein then says, "From now on, I'll call you Captain." But Dunn tells him, becoming a Beyonder isn't that easy. After saying this, Dunn takes him into another room and tells him, "Look, all the people whose graves you see here were members of our Nighthawks who wanted to become Beyonders. But in their quest to become Beyonders, they lost control and eventually died. Let's leave that aside. Now, tell me how much you know about the myth of creation." The client then explains that God was born first, creating the first ray of light and then creating the entire universe. One of his eyes became the sun, the other the crimson moon, and from his body the earth and stars were created. Here, Dunn explains that we all know the story. Let me explain how the portions are created. Essentially, we have a number of ingredients that, when combined, create the portions. If someone wants to become a birder, they must first drink the portion. After that, 22 pathways open up for them. For now, we have 4 portions in sequence 9. As I already told you, each sequence starts at 9 and goes down to 1. So the first portion is called Sleepiness, which leads to the Darkness pathway. The second portion is called Corpse Collector, which leads to the Death pathway. The third portion is called Mystery Prayer, which leads to the Hermit pathway, and the last portion is called Seer, which leads to the Fool pathway. So if the client chooses the 2 starting portions, he'll gain combat power, but that's not the case with the other 2, and for the Seer portion, they only have 1 Seer. Then Dunn sends him to Old Neil and tells him to go to him. He'll help you choose which pathway to take. Now, on the way, Clint thinks he should choose 1 portion and follow any one path because he simply wants to learn about the world. He's not interested in power. He then arrives at the alchemy room where he meets Niall and learns that Niall is a birder himself, currently working on sequence 9. Niall tells him, "Look, you can decide which path you want to take, but for now, help me handle this book." Then after a while, Niall tells him, "I have a book by Appa Roselle, but I can't read it because I don't understand the language. So take this page, and if you understand it, tell me what it says." The client, upon looking at the page, realizes that the language is Chinese, and the client himself came from China, so he was able to easily read what Roselle had written about himself. After reading this, the client learned that Roselle was a very cool guy, and that he himself, like him, had come from the future. Now here we learn that Roselle had written that after drinking the potion, you would be transformed into something like that. You'll also need to act, because potion names aren't just last names. They also indicate how to acquire the potion within your entire body, and to do that, you'll need to consistently act in that way. But here, Rosali also explains, I made a huge mistake choosing this pathway, and that's why I regret it now. However, anyone who chooses this pathway in the future should be very careful because choosing the wrong one can cause serious problems later on. After reading these pages, we see him telling Niall that he wants to choose the Sorare portion. But here, Niall gives him a warning, saying, look, once you've consumed a portion, you can't change your pathway no matter what. And then, here, Klein says, I understand. We then see Neil mixing several ingredients to create a portion. He then places it in front of Klein and tells him to drink it. As Klein drinks the portion, he suddenly feels dizzy, and we see the portion enter his bloodstream. The client continues to feel dizzy, but Neil tells him to wait a while. You'll keep feeling dizzy, but focus your mind. After a while, you'll notice that your dizziness will stop. And now, finally, Klein becomes a Beyonder, also of Sequence 9. But we see that when Klein opens his eyes, he sees everything in color, so Neil explains that this is your power. With its help, you can see the aura of the person in front of you, and you can also see the person's health condition. But apart from this, Klein can also see spirits. He even sees one there, but after a while, that spirit disappears. But here, the client is having a severe headache. He says that he feels dizzy, and his head is splitting with pain. But here, Neil explains that this is common. If you overuse your power, you might experience this feeling, and the client then double tapped the top of his head. After this, we see that his spirit visions disappear, and then he understands how to use his power, how to turn it on, and how to switch it off. He sees normally again. Neil then explains that besides spirit vision, you have many other powers, but we'll end today's class here, and before we leave, I want to give you some Demon Hunter bullets that will be useful to you later on. When Klein returns to Dunn, Dunn tells him, look, you've become a birder now, and the life of a birder is very dangerous, so I want you to work as a clerk here so nothing happens to you. Dunn even gives him his salary in advance, which is 12 pounds. The client is overjoyed to see this, as we know he's very poor. His family's financial situation is already poor, therefore seeing so much money at once, the client is overjoyed. Then Dunn explains that his first task is to go and buy a walking stick. We then see the client purchase one. He then continues to wander around Wells' house, hoping to find a clue that will lead him to the address, so that we can find out where the Antigonus family's possessions have gone. While the client is working on this, Leonard appears and tells him that he must accompany him on his first mission. Our mission is that a boy named Elliot has been kidnapped. Now we have to find out where Elliot is. But the client asks, why are we solving cases that don't involve any supernatural powers? Because I learned from Dan that we only solve cases that involve supernatural powers. Leonard explains, look, you're right, but the man who gave us this mission is a regular client of ours. That's why we're doing this for him, and your seer powers can be useful in finding the boy. Then we see that he is given some clothes. In other words, the client is given some child's clothes. The client then places his chandelier on top of the cloth. Then we see him use a power called Dozing Road. We see that the chandelier will fall in whatever direction the boy is facing. And then we see that here, the client activates his power by double tapping. After this, he learns which street the boy named Elliot is on. We then see them stop in front of a house after a while. From outside the house, the client can see the two kidnappers sitting on chairs, the child tied to the side. Then Lenny tells him, you did a great job. After saying this, he immediately breaks down the door and starts inside. We then see one of the two kidnappers attack him. However, Lenny dodges their bullets and then breaks the gun with his bare hands, then beats both of them severely. We then see them calm down for a moment, but suddenly, something seems to happen to both kidnappers and they get up again to attack them. Then Lenny tells the client to take the child and go somewhere outside, and here we see the two kidnappers join forces. A massive monster is created, and this monster moves to attack Leonard, but even these two monsters combined, they can't touch Leonard. Leonard seems to be constantly teleporting himself from one place to another. Then the monster tries to escape, and we see Klein shoot him. Then the monster goes flying through the air, but suddenly we see something happen to the monster in mid-air, and his body explodes on the spot. This is because of Leonard, because we learn that Leonard is a birder. He's also from Sequence 8, and his sequence is called Midnight Poetry. This means that he can put anyone to sleep with his poetry. That is his lullaby. Then we see something start to happen to the client. He feels as if Klein has been in this room before, and then the child is reunited with his parents. We learn here that both kidnappers actually drank the portion, which is why they both turned into monsters. We also learn that no one can become a bearder by drinking the portion. We then see Klein walking away after the task is completed and asking someone, "How did you like this power?" We learn that he was actually talking to his shadow, and his shadow explains that I didn't find his powers all that unique. Now, Klein has returned to his home and is about to tell Melissa that he's got the job. But suddenly, we see Klein return to the same room he once visited, realizing he'd been there before. He sees a diary in front of him. It says, "Everyone will die." While he's looking at it, the scene suddenly shifts, and he sees the flower card beneath his feet, and someone is laughing. But then Klein opens his eyes and finds himself in his room. But then Klein realizes that the dream wasn't a waste, as he realizes that the kidnapper's room must hold a clue to the Antigonus family book, so he decides to go there. But before that, we see that the client has used his own money to buy a nice house and moves in with his sister. Then we see their older brother Banson arrive and learn that the client has used his own money to buy a large house. Banson gives him a gift. He explains that now you've got a job, so I've brought you a suit. From now on, you'll wear this to your job. Then the three of them are celebrating their new home, as well as their client's new job. A few days later, we see Dan interrogating a man named Jenkin, the man we saw earlier who was stalking the client. Then we learn that Dan uses his magic powers and enters Jenkin's dream, revealing that Jenkin previously possessed the Antigonus family book. But then someone gave Jenkin money and Jenkin sold the book to someone. Now here, Leonard sees a symbol behind his head and tells him that this man definitely works for the Secret Order. The Secret Order group is basically a group of bad people. They both worry that if they get the Antigonus book before them, they could misuse it, so they both have to work together to find it. Just then, we see a man arrive. He tells them that the client has found a clue related to the book. Then they both come to the house. They are where the kidnappers were earlier. Here, Klein brings them both to a room. But upon entering the room, he sees that there's no book there, but instead, there's the decomposing corpse of a woman, and this woman has a grown child. His name is Ray Beaver. They suspect that Ray Beaver may have killed his mother and escaped with the book. Klein then uses his powers to try to locate Ray Beaver. However, the stick in his hand is moving around the room, and he's about to attack Klein, but Dunn stops him from doing so. Dunn explains that there may be some kind of power in this room that's preventing them from reaching Ray Beaver. Therefore, they'll have to find another way to reach him. Dunn then takes the client to another location. Upon arrival, he first compliments his suit and then gives him a pendulum, explaining that it will help him harness his powers effectively. Dunn also informs him that they have received permission to use sealed artifacts. So here, the sealed artifacts are displayed. An artifact is a highly powerful tool occasionally used by the Beyonders. Dunn is considering using one of these artifacts to locate Ray Beaver. The artifact in question was kept in another city, and we see three Beyonders bringing it to Dunn. The artifact they bring is designated 2049. Dunn remarks on its immense power, questioning if it might be too much to handle. However, Harson explains that if they want to capture Ray Beaver, whom they suspect might be a member of the Antigonus family, they have no other option but to use 2049, as the artifact was created by the Antigonus family itself. Harson then informs everyone that they are about to activate the artifact, instructing them to extend their left hands and move them up and down. Klein wonders what is going on, but seeing everyone else doing it, he follows suit. Subsequently, a figure emerges from the artifact, one that initially looks cute, but soon transforms into a demon-like entity, suddenly seizing Klein and appearing as though it intends to turn him into a puppet. Lena saves the person's life and explains that the puppet can control anyone within a 5-meter radius, turning them into a puppet itself. However, simply pushing the victim, just as Lena had done to the other person, can prevent this transformation. The doll keeps targeting the client, leading Lena to speculate that the doll is pursuing them because the client possesses the Antigonus family's ancient book. The doll then attempts to turn Lena into a puppet as well, but Lena is saved just in time. This explains why they were waving their hands up and down, to identify anyone on the verge of transformation so they could intervene and save them. They then throw Ray Beaver's coat in front of the doll, which enrages it upon seeing the garment. This confirms to them that Ray Beaver is a descendant of the Antigonus family. Realizing the doll will lead them to Ray Beaver, They follow it to a warehouse where Ray is attempting to absorb the full power of the Antigonus family's book through a ritual. During this ritual, he places the book inside his own body to harness its power, but something goes wrong. Ray begins to transform into a monster, and a Joker, a member of the Secret Order, suddenly appears, revealing that he too is after the book. However, he is wondering how to retrieve the book, given that it has already ended up inside Ray Beaver's stomach. Meanwhile, outside the warehouse, the entire Nighthawk team arrives. The client informs everyone that something is amiss inside the warehouse, and suddenly, a massive monster emerges and immediately attacks them. We see that, with the exception of the client, all the other Beyonders step forward to battle the monster. As they continuously unleash their powers, Dunn tells Daily to use his abilities to discover the creature's weakness, since Ray Beaver is already dead and is currently under the book's control. Daily uses her powers to discover the monster's weakness, but to defeat it, they need to hold it down for at least 3 seconds. Dunn uses his ability to bind the monster in place, but suddenly spikes erupt from the monster's stomach and pierce the bodies of both Dunn and Leonard. The monster then uses its power to break free from their grasp, but Klein arrives just in time and puts it to sleep. Daily steps in, uses her powers, and bursts the monster like a bubble, though she gets injured in the process. Dunn rushes to her side and gives her a magic potion, which is actually a healing potion, while Klein picks up the book. Just then, the Joker attempts to attack Klein from behind, but Dunn shoots him. However, it turns out to be a decoy. Dunn tells Klein to hide the book and warns him not to go near 2049 under any circumstances. We learn that the Joker is a Beyonder of Sequence 7, making him more powerful than any of the Nighthawk members present. The Joker proceeds to defeat them one by one using various tricks. They are at a loss as to how to beat him until Klein fires a shot at him. The Joker is hit, but he extracts the bullet from his stomach and holds it in his hand. And then, after outsmarting everyone, the Joker opens the 2049 box. This causes the doll's power to surge dramatically, as the Antigonus family's book was aiding in its empowerment. We see the doll turning everyone into its puppets. Klein realizes that to avoid becoming a puppet himself, he needs an external force, someone to give him a push. So he performs a ritual to enter the world of the gray fog, and then Klein, he returns to his world. Now, Klein isn't becoming a puppet, but he must somehow pretend to be so he can use the right timing to attack the doll. Here we see Leonard also use his shadow to escape the puppet world. Here, the Joker approaches the client and says, "Give me the book and I'll free you from here. Otherwise, you know you'll become a puppet. You're a Sequence 9 seer and I'm a Sequence 7 seer. I'll tell you, you'll find the clown on Sequence 8. After saying this, the Joker himself comes into the puppet's range, meaning he comes into the doll's range, after which he himself begins to become a puppet. Then we see the Joker freeze in place and slowly about to transform into a puppet when Klein shoots him, and before dying, the Joker utters, "Horror Nakis." Now, even the client did not know what this means, and then the box containing the doll is closed, after which everything becomes normal, and then these people take the book with them and close it inside a gate, and here we see that it is done. He praises the client and says, "You did a great job today." But then the client notices the Joker's body, and Dunn explains to him that he hasn't done anything wrong. Don't think you killed anyone, but rather that what you did was necessary, because if you hadn't done it, the Joker would have killed others. The next day, we see Harrison taking 2049 back with him, and before leaving, he also praises Klein. After they leave, Dunn tells Klein to go home and rest. The client realizes that his portion has been digested in his stomach, as most portions sometimes take a year to digest, but the client needs to know what the Joker said to him last. So to learn about that word, he meets a history teacher at his university. His name is Ejik. Here, Ejik explains that he doesn't even know what the word means. However, the client hasn't yet told his history teacher that he's become a Beyonder. But here, Ejik tells him to be careful next time, so be careful wherever you go. Then we see a strange man being scolded by his master, and both of them are members of the Aurora Order. This means that both of them are bad people, and basically their group worships a god called the True Creator. The man explains that the book of the Antigonus family is extremely powerful. It is beyond anyone's understanding. That's why I found 3 goats and gave them the book and told them that I need to know everything about it. Well, these 3 people who were investigating the book were none other than Clint Welch and Naya. Now all 3 of them are dead, and the book has gone to Nighthawk. Now here his master scolds him and says that because of an asshole like you, our master is delaying his return. Then suddenly something starts happening to this man. He bites off both his fingers and eats them, and then this man tells them not to worry because the client is still alive. So I will go to him and find out where the book is, and here we see the client who has come to Neil because today Neil will teach him how to do ritual magic. And here, before you can perform the magic, you'll need some items that will help you. I've already placed them here, so let's perform the magic. Before the magic begins, we see Neil create a wall of spirituality around the area. This was necessary to prevent anyone from interrupting their ritual. Before performing the ritual, Neil makes a point of caution after the ritual is complete. Don't even accidentally approach any unknown spirits, as doing so could lead to being drawn into darkness. And if that happens, your death is certain. We see Neil immediately perform the ritual magic. He then asks the Evergods to please give him 30 pounds. He needs to pay off his debt. After saying this, they both leave. Clint is wondering where he's going to get the money, but then we see Neil find a wallet with a lot of money inside. Cleon thinks Neil might steal all the money, but that doesn't happen. Instead, a man appears and tells him that the wallet is his. Later, Neil returns the wallet to Cleon. He gives it to the man, and he's overjoyed by Neil's honesty, so he gives Neil 30 pounds. Neil then explains, see, if you trust Evergoddess and perform the ritual correctly, you too might get whatever you want. But the client still doesn't trust Evergoddess. He thinks Neil got the money because he returned the wallet. That's the only reason he got it, as Klein still doubts how Evergoddess can make you ask for anything and it'll appear before you. Klein then begins to think about the fact that Roselle wrote in his diary that if you want to digest your persona quickly, you should act like your persona, meaning if your persona is written as a donkey, you have to act like a donkey. And the client's persona is called Seer. Now there's only one difference between a fortune teller and a fortune teller. A fortune teller predicts the future by looking at objects or using cards. However, a fortune teller looks directly at a person and predicts their future. Just then, a girl appears before the client and hands him a piece of paper. Written on the paper was, if you want to join our group, it's basically a fortune teller group. A client decides he should join, but before joining, he wants to see if the people there are truthful or deceptive. So he approaches a man and asks him to tell his future. The man then predicts his future and tells him that he can return to the world he came from. The only difference is that it will take some time. Now Klein understands that these people are truthful. Klein thinks he should join their group because it will help him digest his portion faster. We see that the man who is predicting his future is named Glass, and he is constantly coughing. Klein then uses his powers and discovers that the man's lungs are failing. He immediately tells him to see a doctor. Then Glass asks, how do you know? Are you a doctor? But the client replies, no. I'm a surgeon. Then we see the client go to a receptionist, and the girl she tells Klein that Vincent had told her that a seer would be joining the group. We learn that Vincent is a very good fortune teller who had told everyone that a seer would be joining the group. Here we see Vincent explaining to his students how mirrors act as gateways to other worlds and how they can be used to see the future. We see Klein standing outside observing everything when he sees that Vincent has given a box to a girl, and the girl comes out with the box. Klein realizes that something is wrong inside the box. After looking at Klein, the girl smiles and walks away. Klein then meets Klein and we see them talking to each other. Klein then leaves, but we discover that Vincent has 2 of his fingers cut off. This reveals that Vincent is the same man we saw a short while ago and that he brought Klein here on purpose. Now, when the client returns home, he's overjoyed because he feels like everyone will recognize him as a true hero. This means his portion will be digested quickly. Furthermore, he'll need to learn more about the Gray Fog and learn to control its power so he can return to his own world. This will only happen when Klein becomes a powerful Beyonder. Just then, his sister Melissa arrives at his gate and tells him, look, I've made a turtle. Klein praises him and then goes off to do his work. But then his sister tells him, it is a friend's birthday on Sunday and I want the whole family to go to his house. Klein says, okay, if you want us all to go to his birthday party, I'll go. And then, in a flash, Monday arrives, the day Klein will go into the Gray Fog for a meeting. And here we see that he discovers even more about Algar. Like, Algar is a Sequence 8 Beyonder, and Payardari is a Sequence 9 Beyonder. Not only that, but here, Klein was also able to see the pathway symbols for both of them. And consequently, besides, Klein could also see the pathway symbol, but the other two, except Klein, couldn't see the symbol symbol. Then Audrey asks Klein a question. Mr. Fool, I've also become a Beyonder. So after becoming a Beyonder, what do I need to be mindful of? Audrey answers. He explains that your portion is called Spectator. This means you have to keep an eye on everyone from a distance. And if you want your portion to digest quickly, act like your portion is called. Then Klein gives the same information to them. He tells them to act like your portion is called. This will not only speed up your portion's digestion, but will also increase your power quickly. Then Audrey asks another question. What will happen to an animal if it consumes a portion of Sequence 9? Hearing this, they both realize Audrey has done something wrong. What happens is that just as Audrey is about to drink her portion, her dog comes over and accidentally spills the potion. The dog then drinks it. Volkar explains that if a dog drinks the potion, two things happen. Either the dog will die, or it will turn into a monster. And if neither of these things happens, it means that your dog has also become a Beyonder. Then Audrey asks her third question. She begins by explaining that in her kingdom, there are many ministers who haven't received a proper education. Yet, despite that, they hold high positions, and I want capable people to replace them. Now, where will I find so many capable people? Then Klein suggests a simple solution. He says, conduct an exam in your kingdom, which you will call the higher examination. In this exam, you will ask people how to run a state. All the ordinary people who participate in this exam, and only those who pass with good marks, will run the government in the future. This will provide you with capable people, and your common people will also have a chance to come to power. And after hearing this answer, both of them think that Klin is a great man who may have lived for another 100 years. That's why he gave such a good answer. But the client didn't do anything great here. In fact, he told them about the government exam in his world. Then Klein explains, look, before the meeting ends, I want to give you both a task. Your first task will be to find Roselle's diary. Furthermore, I will give you both a spell with which you will perform ritual magic. But here you will summon me, not God. This will allow us to communicate without being enveloped in the gray fog. After learning the spells, both of them were astonished. They felt as if Mr. Fool was indeed a godlike entity who had been living since time immemorial. Klein then declares that today's meeting ends. We then see Klein, who is thinking that he should now act as a seer in front of his family, his older brother and sister. Then the two brothers buy their sister a nice dress and then arrive at the birthday party. And after arriving here, we see that the client finds the girl who had the box. And here he also learns that the girl with the box and her sisters are friends with each other. Then we see the three girls go into a room. The girl with the box reveals that Vincent gave her a gift. When the box is opened, there's a mirror inside. The girl begins reciting a spell, essentially one given to her by Vincent. As she recites the spell, she suddenly connects with the true creator. We then see her mirror and the mirror in Vincent's room connect, revealing that Vincent is a Sequence 9 beater and had set a trap for the client. The client senses something is amiss. Upon entering the upstairs room, he sees a demonic force within the mirror, and that force has begun corrupting Selena from within. And here, Klein decides that if he wants to heal Selena, he'll need to use the ritual magic Neil taught him. But before he can perform the magic, he needs some supplies. Then he discovers all his ritual supplies lying around in another room. Here, we see Selena completely under the mirror's spell, and she's bewitching the other two girls. She knocks him unconscious right there. Just then, a clown arrives and, using his magic powers, binds him. He then places all the ritual items on a table and begins praying to the Ever Goddess to heal the girl. But Vance intervenes and frees her. Afterward, we see Selena imprison him. Vance, through Selena, asks the client what he found inside Antigonus's notebook. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll kill both of these girls here. The client is powerless, unsure of what to do. Then we see Audrey praying for him using the spells the client had prescribed. After this, we see a gray fog begin to surround the client's body, after which he is freed. And here we see that Vance is also weakened by the gray fog. Vance thinks he must capture the client before he loses, and to do so, he puts his hand inside the mirror, but he can't do anything. Before he can do that, the client performs his ritual. That is, he completes his ritual. Then he prays to the Ever Goddess and begins to ask for Selena's healing. We see Selena slowly recovering. Meanwhile, the client shoots the mirror, and the mirror shatters. The mirror's effect on them all ends. He goes to see his sister, Melissa, and decides not to tell his sister or brother about the bearder. He won't tell his sister or brother that he's a bearder. Here we see Vincent's plan fail. Just then, his master comes to meet him and tells him, now your plan has failed, so we are killing you. And here we see Vincent being killed. Then the client goes to Dan and tells him everything. He explains, look, This is what happened. I think Vincent must be working for some organization. Then they both go to Vance's house. Upon arriving, they discover that Vincent has already been killed. But here, Klein reads about the true creator in a piece of mirror. Then Dunn uses his powers to peer into Benson's mind and sees a large area where he sees the true creator's true form. After seeing the true creator's true form, Dunn is stunned. Then on the other side, we see Audrey inside the Lawn Kingdom, who was very happy because there was a function at her house today. Out of joy, she starts walking her dog, but then her dog says, "I'm feeling dizzy." Here Audrey understands that with the help of the Beyonder's power, she is able to understand what her dog is saying. Then the next day, we see a theater play where a woman stands in front of everyone and tells everyone about the Alpha Alpha tragedy. So basically, this tragedy takes place on a ship where the people on board suddenly start killing each other. The ship's name is Alpha Alpha. Then, their hero, Trace, arrives and rescues the remaining survivors. Seeing this, everyone on board starts clapping, and here we see Dunn and Klein among the audience. They are. Here we learn from these two that Derry has taken the book Antigonus with her. This is because Dunn has been feeling unwell ever since he saw the strange man there. The client then explains to Dunn that the strange man he saw in his dream must be his true creator, essentially an evil god. Here we see the story from a week earlier. We learn that while the client was sitting to see the future, his first client appeared. She explained that her husband, Joyce, was on the Alpha Alpha ship a month ago, but there's been no sign of him. However, after seeing the photo, Klein realizes that Joyce had jumped off the ship and would return to their home in a week. But Klein goes and tells Dunn all this, saying, "I think Trace is definitely behind the tragedy on the Alpha Alpha ship." Dunn then explains that if we want to arrest Trace, we'll first need to gather evidence against him, as Triss is very popular. We can't just go and arrest her, and that's why they're here. They had come to see Trace's play, and they both see Triss signing autographs for the girls. Then we see the client's client arrive, thanking Triss, saying, "You saved my husband's life. Thank you." Triss then starts to leave, but before leaving, he sees Dunn and Klein, and Joyce learns from his wife that Klein is the seer who predicted his fate. Then we see Joyce having a problem and meeting with Klein alone. After meeting with Klein, Joyce explains, "Ever since I left that ship, I don't know why, but I've been having nightmares every night and I can't sleep properly." Klein then goes into Joyce's past to see what happened on the ship that night. He discovers a man standing on top of the ship, about to jump overboard, but Joyce grabs his hand. Joyce asks him, "You killed every single man on the ship, but tell me why." Then Klein sees Triss standing behind him, and his suspicions are further confirmed. But then, suddenly, Klein arrives at a ruin near the mountain where he sees a throne. As he approaches, a word rings in his ears, Hornesis. Hearing this, Klein awakens, wondering why this word is haunting him. Klein then leaves the room and tells Dunn everything. He explains that Trace is behind all this. He fooled the public and became everyone's hero. Dunn explains that they need solid evidence against him, therefore they must investigate. However, the two of us won't be able to do this alone, therefore that they will need the help of other division members. As we know, the Nighthawks are part of the Church of the Evernight Goddess, while the other division, the Mended Punishers, are part of the Church of the Lord of Sturm. The third division is called the Machinery High Mind, which falls under the Church of the God of Steam and Machinery. Here, we see Triss sleeping with two women and having their husbands killed. We learn that Triss is also a bearder, who falls under the assassin pathway. Additionally, Triss is a Sequence 8 beater, capable of inciting conflicts between people. Even if Triss lies, people will believe them to be true. Then, a girl appears before Triss. She tells her, "If you do my work, I'll give you a portion of Sequence 7, a witch." We then see the client arrive with Neil in the underground area of his own city. This is a place where all the magic-related items are available. Klins has come here to purchase an amulet to protect his sister and brother from evil forces. However, the client discovers with his powers that more than half of the items are fake, but somehow he uses his powers to find 2 genuine items and obtain 2 amulets for his siblings. But then he notices that Triss has also entered the market and 2 policemen are chasing her. Triss starts running away and one of the policeman shoots her. We see Triss get shot in the hand, but in the process, her cap falls off and Klein picks it up. Now, Klein is here. He uses his powers to locate Triss's location, using his cab to locate her. He then sets off with Dunn. On the way, Dunn tells the client that Triss is part of a group called the Demon Sect. It's essentially a group that worships the evil god. The most unusual thing about this group is that all the high-level members are women. They arrive at a location where the map shows Trace's location. Before entering the building, Dunn tells the client to stay outside, and suddenly several women emerge from the building. One of the women suddenly falls on top of Klein and tells him she's unwell. However, when Klein uses his powers to observe, he realizes that there's nothing wrong with the girl. Dunn then tells Klein that Traces isn't there. We then see them searching for the Beyonder Trace for months, but never find it. Then a scene takes place a few months later, revealing that Klein has now become an official Beyonder and received a salary increase. Apart from this, he used to do fortune telling only once a week. Furthermore, he also regularly conducted meetings within the Grey Fog, but he still hasn't figured out how to control the Grey Fog. We then see him give his siblings a talisman to protect them from evil forces. But then one day, Lennox comes to the client and tells him that the crime rate in the city has increased significantly. 5 times as many people are dying as before. 3 departments are selected to investigate the case: Nighthawk, Penny Sir, and High Mind. We learn that people are dying in very strange ways, and most of them are basically laborers. The reason for their deaths is revealed to be a disease. We also learn that the client's original parents also died in a similar manner, and since then their older brother Benson has worked hard to give them both a good future. The client then discovers through his power that a woman is responsible for all the workers dying from illness, and Dan believes that it's possible that Trace didn't die that day, but rather he's working in collaboration with a Beyonder. Here the client gets a clue. He then explains that all the people who have died were bound to die from some disease sooner or later. But the only difference here is that they were killed prematurely. It seems that the killer is essentially performing a black magic spell on them, and this is done intentionally, meaning by taking their lives, he wants to awaken some demon, or maybe the killer is performing some kind of ritual. And here, Dan explains that the ritual is called life theft. I think so. So we have to find that killer no matter what. Then the client uses his powers and finds out where the ritual is being performed, and these 4 people arrive here. Now we see that this girl, a Beyonder, realizes that these people have come near her, so she attacks a man, but none of this is happening in reality. Rather, she is dreaming because Dunn has used his powers to put her in a dream. He was imprisoned, but later the girl realizes what's happening to her. So she cuts off her hand to break out of the dream. Klein is watching these people fight from a distance. He realizes that this girl, who is a Beyonder, must be the Beyonder from Sequence 7, because all 3 of them attack the girl simultaneously, but to no avail. Later, the girl returns to her house and begins praying to her demon god. We then see a number of spirits emerge from the house, and one attacks one of the men. Then we see the girl escape from the house, and Lena tries to stop her. But before leaving, she leaves a debt in Lena's hands. Lena manages to get her hand treated in time, and the girl, who was a Beyonder, takes her demon god statue and runs away. Now here, when Klein is inside the room, he is seeing the girl's face with his power, and here he comes to know that this girl is the same one whom he had bumped into that day when they had come to catch Trace, and here everyone comes to know that this girl is none other than its Trace. So what happens is that Tess drank a potion from Sequence 7 that turned him into a girl, and that's why all the boys in his group, that is Tess' group, eventually turn into girls, because they're all Sequence 7's beaters. We also learn that Triss has changed her name to Trissy. After this, we see a brief scene of Ezek drawing the outline of a castle with his blood, and then we see his shadow transform into a monster. Then we see Elizabeth come to the client and she says, "Ever since I returned from Lamudi Castle, I've been having nightmares." Then, Klein also catches a glimpse of the castle and realizes that there are many spirits inside it. To conclude the castle's mystery, we see Klein return to the castle with his friends. And here, Dan also brings an artifact with him. It's called the Muted Sun. Any vampire who stays near it for at least 1 minute will be destroyed. Furthermore, if a Beyonder carries this artifact with them for 6 hours, they will be destroyed. He'll go crazy, and this artifact has been with these people for at least 3 hours, so they only have 3 hours left. They then return to the castle and start searching for the vampire. The vampire appears before them, and we see that he looks like a knight, except that he doesn't have a head. Klein then uses his crimson power to try to bind him, but he breaks free and then goes to attack Dunn. He then takes the artifact from Dunn and throws it at him. Dunn then tells his friend Freed to find his weakness. We learn that Freed is essentially a birder with a death pathway. This means he's incredibly good at ghost hunting. He then uses his spirit vision to tell him to attack his right hand. Dunn attacks attacks his right hand. However, Knight uses his sword to break the bullet in two. Klein goes to retrieve the artifact, but Knight attacks him and breaks his neck. However, the client appears to be in no pain. Later, he realizes it turns out that Dunn had trapped everyone in a dream, which is why he didn't feel any pain, and the artifact is still with Dunn. Then we see the Knight suddenly attack Dunn's head. Dunn then declares that the minute is over, and then the artifact uses its power to destroy the Knight. The trio then finds a photo that appears to be 1,000 years old, and they believe this photo is from the 4th epic. So friends, epochs means era. Just as we have 4 eras, and currently the Kali Yuga is in progress, there are 5 eras within this era. But you can't even call it an era. It would be better to call it a history era, because all the eras or histories shown to us in this era series are only 1,000 years old. And right now, the 5th epic is underway. This is the time when humanity is slowly advancing in technology. Now, after seeing this photo, they think that perhaps this man was the owner of this castle, and it is said that he suddenly disappeared. But here we see the client who, after seeing this photo, it seemed like it was my history teacher, Ezekiel. They decide to stay inside the castle for a little while longer because they suspect there might be another evil spirit inside. So, Dunn explains, "Look, we can't stay here with this artifact for long. Therefore, we'll have to work in shifts. This means that someone will go inside the castle first, holding the artifact. They decide that whoever goes inside will hold the artifact for 2 hours, and then the other 2 waiting outside will come in as their turn comes." Then explains, "I'll take the responsibility of going inside the castle, and for now, I'll stay with the artifact for 2 hours, and in the meantime, you two can go outside and rest a little." But when Klein is inside the castle, he's at a loss as to where the artifact came from, as no one else knows. He decides to go into the gray fog and research it. Once inside the gray fog, he looks into the artifact's past and discovers that it was a church. It comes from the Eternal Blazing Sun, and the church's name is the Eternal Blazing Sun because there are 7 gods in this world, and 7 churches have been built to worship each one. This church, the Eternal Blazing Sun, basically worships the sun god and has a portion of the sun pathway. Here the client sees a priest inside the church who holds an artifact in his hand. We then see the object shining before him enter the artifact and the priest dies. Then we see Klein, who is unable to understand what this golden liquid is, accidentally touches it. After this happens, the temperature of the liquid suddenly rises so much that the entire area begins to burn, and Klein feels as if he will die. But then the gray fog arrives to save his life, and Klein realizes he's overexerted his power. This is because he's gotten too close to the Eternal Blazing Sun, a god no ordinary human can see directly. This is why this happened to Klein, but after a while, healing occurs, and then we see that after a while, the client begins to see a number of words such as Angel of Pure White, and Sequence 4 of the Sun Pathway, Unshaded, appears before him. He is also told that it is forbidden to look directly at or touch God. He learns that the liquid he touched was essentially the sun god's blood. The client then emerges from the gray fox. He declares that next time he will think twice before using magic on anything. Now, since there were no spirits inside the castle, the people return home in the morning. We also see that Elizabeth will no longer have nightmares, but then Klein notices that a letter has arrived in his name. He discovers that the letter was sent by Ezek, who wrote that he had discovered something about the Hornices. As soon as Klein arrives at Ezek's room, he sees a picture of the castle on the wall and realizes it's the same castle they visited last night. Just then, Ezek appears behind him. He explains, "I've been having nightmares lately, and whenever I wake up in the morning, I see there's a castle built on top of the wall. Let's forget all that." Now, the word you told me means something connected to a mountain. After saying this, he hands the client a book. The client immediately takes the book and leaves. But Ajik stops him and says, "You're no longer a university student, so you have to read the book here." As Klein opens the book, he sees a photo of a castle near the mountain, which is in ruins. Klein realizes that this is the same castle he saw in his dream, and there was a huge throne there, as if it was not for a human being, but for a god. Furthermore, this mountain called Horns was built between 2 castles. According to the ruins found here, there used to be a country here, and that country was called the Nation of Evernight, and its people looked like normal humans. This country had a law. They believed that dead people were not inauspicious for them. So even if a family member died, they would make that person sleep with them in their room for 3 days. But no one knows what happens to the bodies after 3 days, whether they were buried or simply thrown away. The ruins reveal that there were many human remains there, but no matter how hard they tried to find them, they haven't found any human bodies within the ruins. Therefore, even today, all the people who come here to conduct surveys believe that all the people of this land suddenly disappeared one day, and they would ask an entity named Har, also known as the ruler of Evernight. Then we see the two drinking coffee. The client finds the coffee a little bitter, so he adds 2 spoons of sugar. Then Ezekiel asks, "You used to add only 1 spoon of sugar every time, so what happened this time?" Klein makes up any excuse. We then see Ejik explain, "I'm learning about witchcraft these days, and I feel like your destiny has been tampered with, and I also feel like our fates are connected." Ejik also realizes that Klein is that person in real life. He's seen the drawing of the castle, but here, Ezek tells Klein, "You don't need to be afraid of me, I just want to know about my past." And here, Klein takes him to the castle. But here, Klein already sees through his powers that he must help Ezek because in the future, Ezek will save his life. Now, after arriving at the castle, Ezek is reminded of old memories. He explains that this castle used to be very beautiful, and there was a stable here where he had a lovely horse. Furthermore, he had a lovely son who used to run around the castle with a huge sword. He used to say, "I am the king's knight." Hearing this, the client realizes that the spirit they killed last night was none other than Ezek's son. Ezek picks up his son's sword, after which we see the client also begin to experience old memories. He observes how this castle used to be a beautiful palace where Ezek's son used to sit and polish his sword. Then we see the basement entrance open before Klein, but when the two of them arrive, as they went into the basement, they noticed a foul smell. Klein suspected there must be some evil spirit there. When they went inside, they discovered a coffin containing the dead body of Ezekiel's son. Klein, upon seeing the coffin, realized someone had tampered with it. This is why Ezekiel's son later transformed into an evil spirit. Ezekiel becomes enraged after seeing his son's dead body. After this, we see all the evil spirits approaching Ezekiel and standing around him. Then we see a scene from the past where a war is underway, with the bodies of numerous soldiers lying there, and some soldiers are setting fire to the remaining dead bodies. Suddenly, Ezek awakens. It seemed as if he wasn't dead at all, and after seeing him, all the soldiers flee in fear. Here we see a brief scene of an old woman who is essentially practicing black magic, saying that a dead man will come back to life and kill everyone. Now all the soldiers present here, they attack Ezek all at once, but Ezek kills each one of them one by one. Then using his powers, Ezek throws everyone into the air and then blows them apart with his hands. Then he uses his powers again, and a giant skeleton appears, and together they kill each soldier. We are then shown another time where Ezek has won a major battle and then returns to his castle. Later, he marries and has a child. We learn that an entire army of spirits has formed around Ezek, but this has had a negative impact on his wife and children. Ezek feels that if he stays here, his powers will affect his family. So here, Ezek leaves his entire kingdom and goes somewhere far away, and now these memories end here. Then Klein goes and picks up Ezek, and we learn that Ezek is a beyonder from the death pathway. But for now, we are not told the sequence. And then here, Ezek reveals that his son was also a beyonder, and that he forced, meaning he was buried while he was still alive, and someone did it intentionally. This is done so that the Beyonder's evil will doesn't fall on anyone else. Now his body was sealed, but we see that it was a dead body, his head was missing. Then Ezek understands that someone must have deliberately cut off his head. After hearing this, Clint understands that Ezek's son became an evil spirit because someone tampered with his body, and that's why we didn't see his head when he was fighting us. Then Ezek explains that whoever did this to his son, I won't spare them. Then we see him use a technique called death blood, after which they both reach a large gate. As they open the gate, numerous skulls emerge from within, and one of those skulls turns out to be the head of Ezek's son, and then they both give Ezek a proper burial. Klein then asks Ezek, "Did you find out who you were?" Ezek replies, "Not yet, because I've had so many dreams, and in every single one of them, I have a family, but I don't know why. Because of my powers, or because of something, I harm my family and end up living alone." Here Ezek realizes that all his dreams were real, because over these 1,000 years, he has lived many lives. Whenever Ezek died, he was reborn and forgot about his old life. Furthermore, in each life, he had a family, but in the last, he was left alone. And this is why, in this new life, we see that Ezek didn't form a family because he fears being alone again. But then, Ezek thanks Clint and says, "Thank you for helping me." Now, Clint is also thinking about his family, and he says, "Isn't the real Clint, but as long as I'm alive, I'll live well with my siblings so they don't feel sad about my departure. And when a client leaves this world, they want to take some good memories with them." And that's the end of today's recap. I hope you enjoyed the story as much as I did. If you made it this far, you're officially a real one. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe, because we've got a lot more insane manhwa recaps, overpowered protagonists, crazy plot twists, and epic battles coming your way. Also, let me know in the comments which manhwa you want me to cover next. I read every suggestion. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next recap. Until then, take care and have an awesome day.